Oh, hello. I'm just trying to get more of these so I can finally afford a Halo War Bomb because of inflation.
24 karat gold labubu.
The cost of living crisis has spread to many parts of the galaxy. Well, at least we have hell jumpers now, which is pretty cool.
That was dumb, as in not smart.
Who the hell are you? Against Hitler.
Super Earths.
I got a pop quiz for you. Do you know, legally speaking, what percentage of HellDivers have read the contract of employment, which is presented to you right before completing the tutorial? Is it 0.1% because everybody was busy getting the cape at the end and just want to jump into the action? Or maybe it's 10% because those two giant panels of text can be hard to ignore? Or is it possible that 100% of HellDivers are all good citizens who love to read? Could it be 69% because that's the number of shots you need to take out Factory Strider by using a heavy machine gun on its belly? The real answer is, legally speaking, 100% of HellDivers have read and now bonded to this agreement. I know you're probably thinking, I know for sure I didn't read it, so how is it possible that every single HellDiver have read it? Well, that's your problem, because if you're deep enough inside the spectrum to have read through the entire text like me, you know if the enlisted spending 1 second within 15 meters of a copy of the contract, which is physically unavoidable by the way if you are to finish the tutorial, this shall be interpreted as the contract being read, and the contract shall be considered binding upon being read. Editor version of me here, Legal Eagle dropping a HellDivers video, is not on my bingo card. This is covered in that video and I highly recommend you watching it if you are into HellDivers lore. Basically, according to the law of Super Earth, every single HellDivers had read and agreed to the contract of employment. And one of the duties is, of course, active combat operations, which may include but shall not be limited to raids, deployments, invasions, sorties, forays, assaults, and very interestingly, blitzes. But contrary to popular beliefs, German military in World War II never actually officially employed the word blitz or Blitzkrieg, meaning lightning warfare, but used other terms like
Bewegungskrieg,
meaning maneuver warfare. It's even rumored that Hitler himself thought the term Blitzkrieg sounded foolish. But make no mistake, this word is used exclusively by media worldwide to describe World War II German Army's sudden, concentrated, and coordinated attacks. Even when other nations adopted similar military tactics, they usually give it a name that's nothing to do with lightning warfare, such as Soviet Russia's deep operation and the United States shock and awe or rapid dominance. With NATO and US Marine Corps still use maneuver warfare as a formal term until this day, but it is obvious that nobody wants to be associated with the word blitz. Unless you're Germany that did not lose the Second World War in the 1940s, and despite how much your leader hated it, maybe it stuck around as a powerful propaganda tool. After all, Blitzkrieg is a German word, even if it was not directly used by Nazi Germany propaganda. Similar phrases containing blitz or lightning such as
Blitzschneller Vorstoß zur Küste,
lightning fast advance to the coast, and
Blitzsieg,
lightning victory did appear in propaganda film Victory in the West and Campaign in Poland. By labeling the campaigns as lightning fast wars, it created an aura of inevitable doom. And after 100 years, would anyone be surprised that this dreadful term is now used by a militarism regime? If you want to learn more sussy German military connection in HellDivers 2, we covered weapon prefix system and German weapon designs with more in the previous video. Be sure to check it out if you haven't. Also, just to mention, Hell Super Earth is an official closing for scientific reports. I'm not sure if anyone still uses the word hell this way when not implying a heavy Nazi Germany connection. I must warn you, we're going deep into speculative territories. Please take everything I say with a healthy intake of sodium. Also, in the last video, the tone became too serious near the end due to some pretty heavy real historical references, so how about let's go with something lighthearted and fun this time. Let's talk about discrimination. Nazi Germany's systematic discrimination towards different ethnic groups not only brought pain and suffering to millions of innocent people, but in a twisted and ironic way, Germany as a 20th century superpower might just be the literal biggest victim of such racial policy. Even in Oppenheimer the film, without any spoilers, there's reference about Germany's biggest obstacle to building an atomic bomb being its own anti-Semitism. And I genuinely believe this is a factual statement. If Hitler did not take power in Germany by labeling certain ethnic group as Germany's eternal enemy, which forced Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard to flee for their lives. The Einstein and Szilard letter to President Roosevelt will never exist, and the Manhattan Project that gives the United States nuclear weapon could never take place. Not mentioning US will lose hard to replace core nuclear physicists to the Germans. I really wish to explore this aspect of history further, but due to the current world politics, I don't want this video to attract the wrong attention. This is just a fun lore theory about a funny satirical video game after all. Even so, I fully understand anti-Semitism is a core part of Hitler's rise to power. I'm going to assume in this alternative history, it was not nearly as bad as in real history. I know this assumption makes a sloppy theory, but don't worry, we're not done with discrimination yet. When you first watch the intro of the game and take a look at the staff members on your Super Destroyer, they're not all pure Aryan race the Nazis would like to populate the Earth with. Well, firstly, the idea of the Aryan race is a pseudo-scientific concept with ridiculous standard, even for white people. You must be tall, fair-skinned, not mentioning blonde-haired and blue-eyed. It's way more practical to employ people that's not the mystical Aryan race just to keep everything from falling apart in the Germany-occupied territories. Don't believe me? Just take a look at what Germany did in real history. No, I'm not talking about Hitler's loyal lieutenant Heinrich Himmler giving off more incel energy than being a true beacon of the Aryan race. I'm talking about the Slavic population. In all history, Hitler despised the Slavic race and considered them to be
Untermenschen
or subhumans. However, when faced with the logistical and strategic challenges during their war with the Soviet Union, many Slavs were recruited or used by the Nazis. For example, the Heavies or willing helpers are Soviet prisoners of war or civilians who volunteer to support the Germans by providing logistical support, serving as cooks or other type of laborers, with some of them even fighting as support troops or just cannon fodder on the Eastern Front. I want to make it absolutely clear that the majority of those people, even the volunteered ones, are usually forced by their circumstances. They collaborated with the Germans because they are already prisoners of war or have no other options due to the challenging situations with limited resource and the need for survival. To make it worse, many of them were later executed under Stalin's order. If you want to learn more about those tragic people, you can watch this video titled Soviets Who Helped the Nazis by the Armchair Historian. Even so, the name willing helpers signals voluntary involvement. We all know it was a forced participation for many of those people, when the alternative usually means starved to death or something worse. This is quite like how some of the Super Earth's armed force or CF was recruited. In the propaganda material, it appears they are enlisted. Even if we ignore the fact that this is not always the case because Major Order A153 exists, which is literally titled Hold Planets for Safe Conscription. If you don't know, that's like the opposite of enlistment, you are forced to join with a conscription. Even if we ignore this, there are other hints that people become safe due to alternative motives, which we will be talking about soon. So there exists a real incentive and precedence for World War II Germany to use a more diverse population against their racial agenda. Moreover, even the Nazis in all history understand that just because they can get laborers for free by using slavery, those poor people are just not a replacement for normal productive workers with freedom and rights. German companies that use forced labor noticed that mistreated workers collapsed and could not be replaced easily in specialized armed factories. There are even evidence that the regime started to develop nutritional optimization strategies because who could have guessed that starving people are not good laborers? But make no mistake, the Nazis were trying to keep the gears of their war machine well greased, not to care for the well-being of their forced laborers. It is not hard to imagine a prolonged war will give Germany a stronger incentive to just relax its racial policy to gain more leverage by employing a stronger labor force with more human rights. But don't get me wrong, discrimination will still 100% exist, just like how it exists in the inner workings of Super Earth. And it exists in a pretty explicit way. When you're doing evacuation missions, it is clearly labeled evacuating priority citizens. Even during the Meridian Singularity event and the inevitable destruction of Angel's Venture, rest in peace, the event log only shows the evacuation of high-priority citizens were underway. In-game, we can see the priority citizens that were extracted are healthy-looking, able-bodied adults that don't appear to be people in need or vulnerable populations. Moreover, according to the video from the in-game Super Destroyer media screen, we learned the existence of CCS, or Citizen Classification Structure. which believes all citizens are equal, with some of them being more equal. For this video, we're mostly interested in Class C citizens. On 2185, March 14th, the battle tracker shows that Mordash was destroyed by the Meridian Singularity. Over 95% of its Class C or higher citizens were safely evacuated prior to the planet's destruction. This hinted that only citizenship class higher than Class C are considered to be high priority. And remember when I said there are other hints people become Civ soldiers due to alternative motives? We can learn from scattered Civ communication device log that if a Civ member sacrificed themselves or completed the mission in an exceptionally hazardous environment, they and their family are able to move to the C class. Those poor people are probably volunteering to become Civ soldiers just so their family won't be left behind on a planet that's about to get occupied or destroyed. When life-changing social class mobility demands risking one's life and absolute loyalty to Super Earth, are the Civ members really that different from the willing helpers in World War II? If you think that was bad enough, the next piece of lore is just more damning. One of the training manual tips states that the Ministry of Humanity maintains healthy, productive voters by managing education, healthcare, social grading, and gene management. How this is managed is not explicitly explained in the game lore. However, the fact that social grading and gene management is there in the first place shows substantial likeness to Nazi Germany's state-defined value of life system, an ideological and bureaucratic framework aimed to manage population by ranking people using their religion, marital status, employment, sexual orientation, race, and health. That one is also known as the eugenics classification. The majority of those very real categories used by the Nazi Germany can be fit under the umbrella terms of social grading and gene management. One may question how this information was tracked before modern computing. Well, the plot thickens. Nazi Germany's value of life system is powered by no other than the American multinational technology company IBM. Its subsidiary Dynamic provided the D11 tabulator, with custom punch card system tailored to SS needs to track the categories I just talked about. And many evidence suggests that IBM was aware of the usage of its machine. In 1937, IBM chairman and CEO Thomas J. Watson was awarded the Nazi Order of the German Eagle Medal at an International Chamber of Commerce meeting in Berlin, a prestigious honor indicating Nazi approval of his collaboration. Even so, Watson later returned the medal in 1940s due to the growing backlash against Germany. IBM maintained tight control over the Dynamic through the war years. In the book IBM and the Holocaust, the author Edwin Black's alleged IBM continued supplying equipment, maintenance, and punch cards while into the war, and that these systems are essential to Nazi Germany's mass deportation and extermination logistics. Could it be that IBM was able to continue its technological support due to different US involvement in the war? This is not evidence, but I do find it interesting that the design of the terminals in HellDivers 2 looks a little similar to the later version of the IBM 029 punch card system. But IBM is just one private US company that has ties to Nazi Germany in our history. There's also Ford. What about the other aspect of the United States in this theory? Well, it's finally time to talk about the R2124 Constitution. Just in case if you have any doubt, I did check the side picture and the design of the weapon to make sure it's based on the M1917 Enfield, not the M1903 Springfield. Today, surplus M1917 rifles are still used for funeral honors and ceremonial duties. I couldn't find any footage of it, but it was mentioned in the US Army's Drill and Ceremonies May 2021 edition guide. In real history, it is a dependable, widely issued weapon used in World War I. So many people see it as a symbol of reliability and a quiet tribute to the common soldiers. So, case closed. This is a good old US ceremonial tradition being passed down to Super Earth. Well, this theory really falls apart if you read the description of the weapon. This ceremonial rifle is modeled after the antique relics from pre-democratic times, which I don't think is something a victorious futuristic United States would say to undermine its tradition. The way this weapon is described, plus the fact that it is given to every citizen upon turning 16 for the goal of encouraging service, not to pay tribute to fallen soldiers, tells me something different. By calling the M1917 an antique relic from pre-democratic times, Super-Earth isn't embracing the tradition of remembrance, they're rebranding it for a different purpose. Something more sinister than just giving 16-year-old guns so they can die on the battlefield when they turn 18. So, what could its real purpose be? Let us dive a bit deeper into the history of this weapon before its modern ceremonial use. The M1917 represents rapid wartime adaptation as it was based on the British P-14 design and mass-produced by American factories. It represents the power of industrial capacity in modern warfare. Victory not just through soldiers, but through factories, which we can still kinda observe as HellDivers are backed up with seemingly infinite equipment. But the most important and practical reason for the existence of this rifle is because the US cannot produce enough M1903 Springfield. I'm not going to argue if one weapon is objectively better than the other. The truth is both rifles have their own advantages and shortcomings. But what I can find from historical fact is, when the US entered World War I on April 6, 1917, the nation was immediately faced with a serious shortage of service rifle. The M1903 Springfield was the most up-to-date US service rifle, and despite using foreign designs like the cock-on open system, which US Army did pay for to the Mauser company for its patent, the gun itself is a US design developed by the Springfield Armory. On the other hand, the M1917 was adapted from the British P-14 design, which US factories was already working on under contract. It is more of a rechambered version of the British design, and because of this, it is faster and easier to produce than retooling those US factories for the M1903 Springfield. Therefore, because the M1917 is mostly a British design and the M1903 Springfield was still in production as the official US service rifle, the M1917 has less American pedigree and prestige. Its existence is simply because the US needs more rifle and they need them as soon as possible. Symbolically, the existence of the M1917 Enfield represents necessity, compromise, and practical decision-making in time of crisis. Namely, war. The real purpose of this weapon in HellDivers universe is likely to serve as a reminder that the United States made a compromise, a decision not to achieve the desired outcome. And that led us with the final question. How did Germany become the predecessor of Super-Earth? I must confess, even though I enjoyed researching alternative timeline, I'm not nearly as good as Alternate History Hub, so I'm going to shamelessly steal some of the series from the Dunkirk timeline made by them. Go check out their video if you like alternative history. The level of detailed research and historical reference is just mwah. In the Dunkirk timeline, the Luftwaffe was able to devastate the British evacuation fleet by pure air superiority due to one simple change: the weather. Instead of being limited by poor weather, which protected the British evacuation effort for 7 out of the 9 days, the Luftwaffe was able to go on an all-you-can-bomb buffet that led to the capture of 240,000 British troops instead of allowing Britain to rescue 338,000 troops in real history. Britain loses the bulk of its professional army, Churchill faces immense political pressure, the war cabinet, already split, now leans towards accepting peace terms with Germany. Without the miracle of Dunkirk, there's no morale boost, only national despair. And with Britain piecing out after the Dunkirk disaster, the US loses its main bridgehead into Europe. While Roosevelt can still send supplies, without Britain, there's no viable way to project power onto the continent, resulting in the US never entering the European theater. And if I add my inferior theory of Germany not pushing away their talented minds due to discrimination, Germany was able to design atomic bomb within a similar time window as the United States. This can lead to the potential early mutual destruction before the Cold War years in our history. But due to the economic pressure caused by Germany's expansion and threat of nuclear-capable V rockets, remember, the scientists never left Germany for the US unlike real history, and potentially a political shift within the United States pushed by powerful internal forces with Nazi ties such as Ford, IBM, Standard Oil, General Motors, President George W. Bush's grandfather and his Wall Street influence, US may have decided to collaborate with Germany via economic channels and become more authoritarian at home. But hey, this is just a possibility for a video game lore timeline. I'm not making any political projection or statement regarding current real-world politics. I'm sorry for any American viewers who may feel a bit uncomfortable. And let's just go back to Super-Earth. The map of Super-Earth, which is probably the best thing we can use to speculate on what happened during the last Great War, After overlaying it with a real-world map, we can clearly see where the last Great War wasteland zone resides in real-world locations. Immediately, we can see the British Isles and part of Russia, especially Moscow and the surrounding area, are now wastelands due to the last Great War. Even though it will be very interesting to speculate what happened to them, I want to direct your attention to what I believe is actually the most important information on this map. Why would anyone use a weapon of mass destruction on the northern part of Greenland, Russia, and Canada? Those areas are extreme environments. I understand people still live there, communities still exist with a lot of very interesting cultures, but it is hard to find military assets such as large troop concentrations, civilian or economic targets like major cities or industrial hubs. It is possible for a nuclear attack to target a remote area as a show of power, but why are all those targets Arctic regions? That's when I made a revolutionary discovery that may shock you. Super-Earth is not flat. If we consider the map as a globe instead of a 2D graph, after coloring the impact zones, it seems like this might be a single weapon deployment near the North Pole that created such impact. I know it doesn't look like a perfect circle, but so does the impact of real nuclear fallout or other potential weapon of mass destruction. It will be shaped by wind and weather conditions. However, it's very unlikely this is caused by a nuclear bomb. We can see the center of the impact area is around the North Pole. Even though people can walk there, there's actually no land on the North Pole. Sea ice and seawater can actually soften the fallout of ground detonation, which is the best detonation method if the goal is to achieve maximum fallout effect that renders land inhabitable. A nuclear ground detonation creates far more fallout than an airburst like Hiroshima and Nagasaki because when the fireball touches the surface, huge amounts of soil are vaporized and pulled into the rising cloud. The debris then mixed with fission products, forming heavy radioactive particles that quickly fall back to Earth in dense, highly contaminated fallout trails. But in the North Pole, it creates steam and tiny ice crystals. Seawater droplets and salts can be activated by neutrons, but they don't generate long-lived fallout particles. We're talking about short-lived isotopes like sodium-24 that has a half-life of 15 hours and will drop off to background radiation in weeks, not for more than 100 years on Super-Earth. But even if the bomb was a hypothetical high fission or a dirty design to maximize the effect of nuclear fallout, the long-living fission products will only create a small local hot particle zone. We're talking about a size that doesn't exceed a small city in the worst-case scenario. Obviously, I'm not a nuclear scientist, so I could be wrong with all those statements, but I don't even think a bomb with that amount of fallout material to render those places inhabitable with a Northern Pole detonation is physically possible to begin with. A bomb with such a high fission impact would need 500 to 1500 metric tons of fissile actually fissioning in one burst. This is just beyond any sane design. So, what could it be? Is it a super advanced salted nuclear weapon that's beyond our current technology? Maybe it's tiny nanomachines that consume all living things but hibernate in the cold climate. My personal favorite would be a good old bioweapon. A long-lasting plague that's so devastating, Super-Earth still fears it today and refrained to utilize it further. Similar to the concept of AI or abominable intelligence being restricted in the Imperium of Warhammer 40k. People don't use it not because it's bad, it's because the weapon is too powerful and hard to control. I'm just speculating because we don't actually see any advanced bioweapons at all in HellDivers 2. The TX-41 sterilizer, G4 gas, and orbital gas strike all use caustic, corrosive chemicals that can affect organic life form and sensitive electronics, which makes them advanced chemical weapons. We know the termicide exists and it was horribly engineered to a point that it even caused terminids to mutate and rapidly reproduce, which sounds more like a chemical toxin that has backfired and acted as a stimulant, rather than some kind of microorganism that's supposed to turn the bugs sick. In my humble opinion, a bioweapon against the terminids sounds like a no-brainer considering they are all organic life forms that potentially share similar genetics because they all originated from the same place. Maybe the secret weapon is still on Super-Earth and it will be a doomsday device if the planet was ever conquered by an external force. Do you really believe the emergency seed vault has seed in there when you're drinking synthetic fruit juice and tea-flavored tea? Maybe, just maybe, Svalbard's cold, remote, and geographically stable nature is hiding something else in there. But this is just a theory. A game Sweden, the home of a famous furniture store that also has meatballs and suspiciously delicious frozen yogurt that doesn't taste like yogurt at all, and many well-known game studios that everyone seems to have a love-hate relationship with, and apparently the capital of Super Earth, Prosperity City, which is just Stockholm. I hate to break the narrative here, the lack of lore on the capital of Super Earth is just criminal. I'm sure those wonderful people at Arrowhead just think, haha, it's funny, where I live is the capital of Super Earth as a form of advanced shitpost, but at least give us some more information, please. That being said, it's surprisingly easy to fit this setting into the theory. In real history, Sweden declared neutrality in 1939 and managed to avoid direct involvement in the war. This kept the northern flank relatively quiet. Invading Sweden would have stressed German forces, so Hitler accepted Swedish concessions instead. But just to state the facts, Sweden did export large quantity of iron ore to Nazi Germany, which was crucial for German armaments production. And German troops were allowed to transit to Sweden into Norway, which was very controversial. But that doesn't mean World War II Sweden was simply a Nazi-sympathizing country. Sweden did accept a large number of refugees during the war, including many that are from Hitler's least favorite ethnic group. In the late war period from 1944 to 45, the Swedish government cut off iron ore exports to Germany and allowed the Allies to establish air bases in northern Sweden. Some may say World War II Sweden played both sides against the middle, but I think they did what's best for their country and people in a time of existential uncertainty and impossible choices. Moreover, during World War II, Stockholm was already known as a hub of espionage and diplomacy. Neutral diplomats, double agents, and resistant network all operated there. Swedish embassies and consulates helped communicate between the Allies and Axis power territories, and Nazi Germany's conditional surrender deals were being discussed there in secrecy. And now, think back about the superweapon being deployed in the North Pole. We know how little it serves in terms of strategic value, which makes its devastating effect in the last Great War even more disproportionate. What if it was an accident? A man-made disaster that nobody wants to claim responsibility for? Maybe it was weapon transportation gone wrong, or a terrorist group who disliked the regime that has sabotaged a North Pole weapon vault. If we continue the bioweapon assumption, it appears the weapon was not fully contained after deployment, rendering parts of Alberta, Canada inhospitable. Its effect could potentially be even more devastating during the last Great War, as the map we have doesn't show the initial effect a century ago. The Cold War didn't end with a decisive military victory, but with gradual economic stagnation and internal decay that hollowed out a fundamentally flawed system. With disasters like Chernobyl exposed its limit and acted as catalyst to its collapse. The explosion wasn't just a nuclear incident, it was a crisis of legitimacy, tearing apart the illusion of competence, shattering public trust, and revealing that the state's power rested on brittle foundations of secrecy and lies. In many ways, the silence that followed Chernobyl spoke louder than any battlefield defeat. What if the barren wasteland on the map of northern Super-Earth is a winning World War II Germany's on Chernobyl, but much more impactful? It was something that destroyed the order of control in the occupied territories via millions of casualties, a catastrophe so great that the flaws of Nazi Germany's system were thoroughly exposed. The economy of Nazi Germany relied on plunder and expansion, but the prolonged World War II stagnated its progress, and a crisis that made every working member of the regime realize they were funding something that's not the future, but total annihilation, may just be what is needed to shatter the illusion of prosperity and set in motion the empire's economic unraveling. And what about the command structure that set precedents by Hitler? It was already built on rivalry, corruption, and blind obedience. As ministries and party factions turned on one another, while the Führer's cult of personality offered only paralysis and denial, political infighting turned into bloody war for resource. Control over territories loosened as savagery once again burns like wildfire through a fragile facade of civilization. And just like that, the world was on fire. When the North turned poisonous and every great power withered, broken into pieces, the surviving world needed a capital that's not synonymous with its own near annihilation. When Berlin and Washington become the primary suspect, Sweden, spared from the worst of devastation, carried the memory of neutrality and the strange, bitter reconciliation between the remaining powers. Stockholm rose as prosperity city, yet the remnants of the former German Reich lingered, refusing to die. Just putting some of my closing thoughts here. I hope you find this video and the previous one entertaining. As for the series itself, I do not claim mine is the best or the most accurate one. I'm sure you can point out a lot of plot holes and inconsistency, and I do want to thank everyone who has commented and engaged in the previous video. Some comments are really thoughtful and interesting, like this really good one from Nicholas about a different alternative timeline where Germany was never demilitarized but joined the anti-Soviet side in the end of World War II. And that can lead to a way stronger NATO, which dominated and passed down many of Germany's military elements, and may help explain why part of Russia is now a wasteland in the last Great War map. And Nicholas also admitted that even this cannot fully explain everything we see, such as the heavy authoritarianism aspect of Super Earth, but so do any other series anyone can think of, right? The absence of information about the lore of the last Great War makes it impossible to come up with a watertight backstory for Super Earth. But I think that's what makes HellDivers lore so intriguing. Everybody can come up with their own story and their own conclusion based on snippets of lore that people can discover. But the truth will always be shrouded in mystery, and I think it's better that way. And to see people sharing their thoughts, showing their love and support for the first video, even subscribing, thank you all for doing that, and criticizing my series with your own logic and research. I'm just so humbled and grateful about it all. It made me realize that you guys are taking my work seriously. And what was originally just a brain fart turned into a project that took months of research, scripting, video recording, and editing. I do have a 9-to-5 corporate job, so excuse my lack of speed here. It makes me realize all that was not in vain. I'm just thankful that my effort did not go unnoticed, and you guys seem to have fun watching. Will there be another HellDivers 2 lore video? Probably, but not for now. I'm trying to focus on a different project that you may also find interesting. You have my promise, I'm not going to make something that myself isn't interested in, and if you find this video interesting, you may like the next one. So thank you all for your support. I wish you all have a great rest of your day, no matter where you are. Here's me trying to steal the super credit from my boy. See you in the next video. Bye!